To order at 4:32 p.m. We have some policy updates to discuss, and I'll start by turning it over to Dr. Severe to go over those for us.
Thank you, Chair and members. There are 4 policies before you today to potentially adopt and 1 for discussion. You should have received all of those in your packet along with a brief summary of each of those at the top. So I'll just sort of start at the beginning and we'll work through them. The first one's 2.805, which is our purchasing policy. In the past, this district has had a $100,000 threshold for contracts before they would be brought to the board for approval. That was lowered some time ago to $25,000. That is really, especially in this age of inflation and the amount of purchasing that we do, that is a number that has had the opportunity to delay implementation of some things that we would like to move forward and get into the hands of teachers and students in a more expedient fashion. It doesn't change any of our backstops in terms of the due diligence we do in terms of RFPs and various things, but this would just raise that limit so that we could move forward with those. You have on the draft, you see the 2 highlights. The number that was 100,000 was formerly 25,000. I'll answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Severe. Do we have any questions about this policy update?
Can I just ask one quick question, Dr. Severe? You said this doesn't change any of the backstop procedures that exist, such as RFP thresholds. Can you just give a little more explanation of what other procedures are in place before anything even comes to us?
Sure, certainly. So anytime we purchase anything, there has to be a purchase order process. It has to be within the budget. It has to meet approval of various department chairs and principals and things along the way. And so at the appropriate time, if it's under a threshold, it goes through our purchasing department, just like any other purchase would. This wouldn't change that. At $50,000, we would still have a request for proposals that would go out to the public. If it was in that window of $50,000 to $100,000, then it would just be approved internally, and it would get into the right place. If it's above $100,000, it would come here for one final step.
Great. Thank you.
I would entertain a motion on this policy.
Motion to approve. Second.
All right, everyone in favor of approving the updates to policy 2.805, please raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, that motion passes. Moving on to 4.210, Dr. Severe.
Thank you, Chair and members. You may recall not too long ago, the grading scale was changed due to a change in state board rule. It went from a 93 to a 100 to a 90 to 100, a 10-point scale. And this was done across the state. It is the uniform grading policy. It is the metric by which things like Hope scholarships and such are determined. It was discovered in another district that in the sets of policies across the state that same language had not applied to the credit recovery policy. In other words, the old policy, the current policy, the one we have now, says that it's if you go through a credit recovery program, you get the minimum passing score, which is a 70. In fact, that is a 60. That is what we have been doing. We have been following the law. We've been following the state board rule. This just sort of gets the language of our policy in line with the practice and compliance.
Any questions for Dr. Severe about that? All right, then I would entertain a policy.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? All right, that motion passes as well. Moving on to 4.301.
Thank you. That's the interscholastic athletics policy. We wanted to get this in a posture to do two things, actually. One is to make sure that our language is aligned with other districts to say that we will follow all the rules and laws that are out there in terms of participation for athletes. And the other is a requirement that we add into our policy some language about required training relative to severe weather. Which you see on the second page. And you see both of those sections highlighted and footnoted, and I can answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Dr. Sevier? And I'll remind you that this is just for questions. We won't want to have any additional discussion until a motion is on the floor. No questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Is there any discussion around this? All right. All in favor? And opposed? And anyone abstaining? That would be me. Okay. The motion passes with 5 in favor and 2 abstaining. Okay, moving on to 4.700.
Finally, and thank you, Chair and members. The State Board made a change to rules stating that if we are a district that requires testing for awarding credit from someone who transfers in from another non-public school, then we need to have that on our board policies. It's essentially saying that if you come here and you have been in a program that's not necessarily grade aligned to what we do, it might be what we call a Category 4 or Category 5 school, and say, I have had this class and I've had these learnings and I've taken these science classes, but they're not part of an accredited program, then it is our procedure and our policy to test those students, to render credit and appropriate placement. The State Board has said if you're going to do that, you need to have that in your policies, and we're happy to do that. And you see lines 11 through 21 of the second page lay out how that should be done.
Any questions for Dr. Sevier? Yeah.
So we're updating it in our policy? Do we currently have that language in our policy, or we're putting it in there?
We currently have this practice, and not in our policy, but in our administrative procedures.
Gotcha.
So this is something that's going on in the schools now. This is just language to codify it one level up to the board.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? And is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Discussion? All right. All those in favor of adjusting policy 4.700, raise your hand. Any opposed? That one passes unanimously as well. So that concludes the actionable items on our agenda. But I now would like to turn the floor over to Chair Elrod for some reminders and a discussion around policy 1.404, public participation.
Thank you. Sure. So everyone has in front of themselves a copy of our public participation policy as it is and how it has been really since March. The vast majority of it has actually been in place since, as you can see, under issued December of 2017. But I'm going to call attention to line 7 through really, 10, which is in essence that when individuals want to come to address the board, it needs to be on an item on the agenda. So we are going to start doing this within our policies. It's my advice that we follow our policies, and this has not been something that we have done, whether it's been from 2017 or when it's been touched, like it was in March. I want you to know that in March it was taken out. We used to have within the same policy that you could, if you were from a group of people, only one from that group of people could speak, because that would be exceptionally difficult to decide of who is from what group and so on and so forth. That is not a part of this, but we are going to start making sure that public participation is about our agenda items and about the business that we have in front of us, to make sure that we're sticking with our strategic vision, those conversations that we're trying to have about that, and of course, the business at hand. It is, of course, with hopes of us continuing to be as effective as possible and making sure that we are using our time and the public's time as best as possible, and to make sure that we hear from everybody that wants to speak about those specific things and needs or issues or concerns. Obviously, this will be a little bit of a change to how people currently sign up, just in that currently they just have to put what they're coming about. It doesn't have to align with the agenda, though it is supposed to. So we are working with IT, and there will be a place where they just have to put what agenda item they're going to be speaking about. And we're coming up with how that's going to be done. So they will still have the same amount of time to sign up. It will still be that Monday beforehand. It will still be the online process, all of that. My thought has been to, instead of just doing this willy-nilly and just being like, we're going to do it one day, my plan has always been to do this at the beginning of the following year, so 2023. So my goal is to start implementing this in January. I know that those times are typically a lot of budget conversations and questions. So to make sure that those people are heard, we're going to have our quadrant budget conversations like we've discussed, and have those meetings, and we'll have additional budget hearings and other things to make sure that people are heard about those specifics. But I know that I've brought up public participation, be it at other meetings or at our retreat, and there hasn't been many concerns about it. But if you do have those, of course, please let me know. I want to make sure that we also, of course, let families and participants know that you are always welcome to contact us in other ways. And public participation is not your sole and only way. And I think right now, unfortunately, some people think that coming over here during their business hours is the best way to reach us. And really, that's not equitable or efficient for them either. So I'm trying to make sure that we're using it as the best use of our times and for theirs.
And then I will, if anyone else has comments, questions about, this is just a board discussion. So I'll call on,
So I just have a really quick question. I know, Chair Elrod, you said that you have had these discussions with IT. Do we know if IT is going to be on board and able to make this happen by January?
Yes, as of currently, they are able to do that. We're trying to figure out what it's going to look like, if it's a drop down of a specific agenda item, or if it's a referral back to the agenda as it's been posted, and then they have to refer to it by typing it in. But
Okay.
either way, one of those things will be ready and available to
Okay, I just want to make sure that we don't have any pushback on, well, I tried it, but it didn't work. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Nabab McKinney?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. My question is just how can we communicate that to our public so that they know in a timely manner that has been a change in the way in which we run board meetings? Is there any way on our website that we can highlight that update effective January 2023?
Yes. We will be updating that, and not just where you do the public participation sign up, but also in the blurb about public participation.
And let me just ask one other thing. For consistency's sake, once that blurb is determined, could you send it out to all board members so that we could share that with our constituents as well?
Absolutely.
All right. Board Member Tyler? Yeah.
I have some concerns about this. I think there are times where somebody comes to speak because they feel like the visibility of speaking at a board meeting is going to provide them a little bit more notice with the public and with us, as opposed to just sending an email. And if they are concerned about something that maybe is not happening in our schools, it will never be on our agenda. So how could they bring it up to talk about it?
I guess it would depend on what individual program or policy or whatever it is that they wanted done in those schools. If they want to talk about it, of course, just like any other topic, they could come to us individually. They could always come to our community meetings that many of us have. And they could always talk to us before or after meetings as well. But specifically, that probably the biggest way that they would talk to us is probably during the budget conversations and when we discuss what's the best use of those budgets. It's probably the best way they would do that, which is also historically the most effective time to do that as well.
I just have a fundamental problem with doing anything that's restricting speech for the people that we serve. I also had an issue I voted against this particular one anyway, when we did it was it the fall or the spring? I can't even remember. It's been a while. I really do feel like public participation is an important piece of this puzzle, even though there are many other ways to contact us and there are many other ways for us to interact with our constituents. I don't want to downplay that. But I also think that public participation at the board is an extremely important part of this, and I don't think it's wise to do things that restrict that.
May I?
Yeah.
I also want to point out, since we didn't review the entire policy, there is also the option of contacting the board 6 days prior to the meeting to request that something be placed on the agenda. And then there is also the option of the chair recognizing individuals not on the agenda for remarks to the board if it's determined it's in the public interest. So there are some different caveats around that. So I sort of see this as a, helping to keep us on task with our agenda, but more so than a way to keep people from being able to come forward. And then there's even the caveat that a majority vote of members present can overrule the decision of the chair if we do or don't want to hear from that individual. I think where my concern comes in is where we have taken action on an item and then we have public comment about that item far after the fact, far after it's already sort of out of our control. So that's just my thoughts on it. Also, just to point out, this is there's no motion needs to be made, no vote. This is a review of what the policy currently is. Now, if that needs to be taken into deeper consideration, that's a separate issue for a separate governance committee meeting. Yeah. Anyone else, though? And I'm sorry if you weren't finished. I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah. I just think, I know that adding the ability for them to ask to appear before the board requires extra hoops for them to jump through if it's not on the agenda. Is that correct? So they could still ask to speak if it's not something on the agenda, but it would have to be much earlier than everybody else who wants to speak about things that are on the agenda.
You do have to request that time.
And they would have to provide descriptive materials. What would that encompass?
Historically, with other districts, what that looks like is they provide a quick blurb of what that is going to be. Basically, we're going to talk about this topic, and I have these bullet points that I need to make. It's not a full presentation, though there are some districts that require that all in advance.
Mm-hmm. I still have some concerns because I can still see this as us looking like we're curating who we hear from.
Sure.
And I have a lot of concern about that.
I can see that being a concern. My goal, of course, is not to limit people talking to us about any of the concerns that they have. I take the role of us making sure that we are streamlining all of our practices and making sure that we're as efficient as possible really quite seriously. And so I've been trying to do that. That's why I didn't do it right away. I've been trying to make sure that we do that with all of our agenda items, with all of our committee items, with the communications that we have, all of those things. But part of that is also following our policies as they stand. The reason why this is potentially going to be problematic for some people is because there might be some people that will feel like they're not being heard. That is not at all the intention. Because, of course, there are going to be people, and have been historically people, that speak about things that are not on the agenda. But those conversations are always welcome and open to us. But to keep us on topic and efficient within our time during the board meeting, that's why I felt like, well, if this is part of and has been long-term, a part of our policies, there's probably a reason why. And it's a way for us to be able to streamline some of those conversations and make sure that more people are able to speak about those topics. I know in the past when we've had some more controversial topics that have been on the agenda, there's been a lot of people upset that they feel like they've not been able to speak because someone else has been there or there's been groups of other people there to talk about whatever, whomever. And so there's been a lot of back and forth on what is the right things to talk about or not. So I'm trying to really streamline that and make sure that everyone's clear on what those options are. I also know that in comparison to other school districts, we have really a very generous public participation policy, though I know that that's not known very well in comparison to our other districts, and particularly our surrounding districts. We have a lot more time and availability. But that's why I wanted to bring it up as a conversation of it is in our policy, and it has been for a long time. It's just not been followed. I don't think it was the right policy for us, and I'm glad it's taken out where we only let one person speak for an entire group, because I frankly don't even know how we would have done that. But I think it does serve us to make sure that topics and conversations are about the agenda as it stands, and that allows us to have those conversations, especially after the director's report, so they can be fully informed. We're making sure that our agendas are out in advance, not only our agendas for the 5 o'clock board meeting, but all of our other governance and committee meetings. So I think all of those things are going to be a part of that organization of making sure that we do this appropriately and not silence people, but provide people a clear pathway of where to talk and how to talk.
And then I guess just my last question about it is if they have to submit their request 6 days before the meeting, and we release our agenda 6 days before the meeting, because it's the Thursday before Tuesday.
Yes.
And sometimes the agenda isn't released till closer to the end of the day on
That's
that
true.
Thursday. And if somebody is perhaps expecting something to be on the agenda and then it is not, they didn't plan to submit
that.
beforehand.
Okay.
Do we have any sort of contingency for something like that?
Not at this time, because it's not in the policy. But I think that's a good revision for us to look at and consider. Okay. I'll write that down.
Well, and then there would be the contingency of asking the chair to recognize them.
Yes, and then the board voting again, about that.
Rosina?
Yeah, I also wanted to bring attention that also if constituents are contacting us as board members and you're hearing a consistent theme, we can ask for that discussion to be placed on the agenda as well to allow people public participation to talk about it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to be able to focus in better on constituent concerns, especially if we're seeing a consistent theme and consistent conversations around particular topics.
Okay. Well, then that also brings me, I'm so sorry. Is it okay?
Yeah, go.
If, let's say, we're going to talk about something on a that's going to be on the agenda on a night that is not a public participation night, does that apply to previous agendas that have already happened, even if it's not happening that night? So if someone wants to speak on something that we did at the second meeting of the month, could they come to that public participation on the first meeting of the month and still be allowed to speak without jumping through the extra hoops?
It is on the agenda in front of us.
So it can only be on the agenda for the first meeting.
Or if it's known for the agenda the next meeting, I would assume. We'll have to work on that for the phrasing. But it's for the agenda in front of us, according to the policy. Yeah.
Okay, well, then I just want to register my concerns because I have a lot of them.
Okay. We have 5 minutes till our meeting. Going to go ahead and say the discussion portion is come to a close. And with any of our policies, if any board member wants to contact Dr. Sevier with ideas or concerns or questions about that, he has been really great about working with me when I have something I want to adjust or that I just want to understand more deeply. And then from there, it's just a matter of getting it on a governance committee agenda. So we'll continue moving forward. It makes really great evening reading, those board policies. All right. With that, I will call this meeting to a close. And I'm going to bang this again because I want to.